partial semi-finals of GUDC 2024 Open Category. I'm Abdul Malik Isifu. I'll be your chair for this particular round. On me with panel is, and given that we are all abreast with BP debate rules, we advise you kindly stick to it. POIs are highly encouraged. Please ask and take them as they may be useful in a particular instance during our deliberation. Without wasting much time, let's now recognize the Prime Minister to open today's debate for us. Sure, ready when you are.
I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Governments at every point in time need to make strategic decisions while considering these three things. 1, that the resources are limited. 2, what exactly do the people of that country patronize the most? But then 3, what exactly gives them a better position in international economics to be relevant? Understand that the number of disciplines that exist are uncountable. Is it realistic to be able to satisfy the needs of all these infinite disciplines, so much so that they yield optimum results? We from opening government say that's impossible. So what exactly does this public funding look like? It can look like subsidizing fees for that specific discipline. It can look like investing more in that infrastructure. It can look like giving more resources to that very discipline. It can look like investing more in their research, investing into creating more jobs for that discipline. It can look like all of these things. But the higher education is necessarily going to be universities. The reason why it cannot be high schools or all of that is because, one, the different disciplines basically occur in universities, but then secondly, most innovation and job opportunities come after university. So it has the higher education has to be the universities. What does economic return look like in this case? So the economic return that the country gets from these disciplines looks like more taxes, more production of products, more exports of these specific of the products from these specific disciplines, and the cultural relevance that the countries get from this discipline specifically. And equal distribution on their side looks like distributing. For example, if the country has 10 million cities, they are going to, for education sector, they are going to equally distribute those limited 10 million into the infinite number of disciplines that exist. So maybe if 3,000 disciplines exist, you are going to invest only 10 million into those 3,000 disciplines. That's what equal distribution looks like. Okay, I'll take you. The ones that are likely to receive more funding are the ones that are generating the most revenue. This is from the info slide. So why exactly are we saying that they are the ones who should be funded the most? 1, on public demand. Understand that most of the times when there is a high revenue generation from a specific discipline is based on 4 things. 1, the capability of the country itself. So the reason why that area is generating the most revenue is because there are specific capabilities of that country. So maybe they have enough resources, maybe they have enough know-how on that specific discipline. So that's what a lot of generation of revenue looks like, right? But then secondly, the interest of citizen is also accounted for that, right? Because the only reason why there will be a lot of demand there will be a lot of generation of revenue from a specific sector is because a lot of citizens are interested in that very sector, right? Because they have the resources and capabilities for that very sector, right? But then what this does is that at a point in time where that discipline is creating a lot of revenue, the perception in the minds of public is that if I go into this field, it's going to give me a lot of money, right? But what this does is that a lot of people in the country then end up pursuing that discipline. At a point in time where you don't invest into that discipline a lot, what this does is that there are a lot of labor that exists, but there are not enough jobs that exist for that very discipline, right? We think investment in these disciplines is important because because those people who are going into those disciplines based on the perception that it's going to create revenue. It's important to create jobs for these people. It's important to invest into these areas. But then The third thing on public demand is the exportational demands that exist, right? So understand that most of the countries are basically niche to specific things that they export, right? What this means is that every country has to produce specific things so that it can be relevant in the global economy, right? So and the reason why the fourth reason why there are a lot of it creates a lot of revenue is because it's needed by the people themselves. So because the reason why it's creating a lot of revenue is because people are patronizing a lot in a specific product or products from a specific discipline a lot. It's an obligation on the government to invest into that discipline because that thing is needed by the people itself. The second case for why we have to invest more into this specific discipline is on international recognition, which means that these specific countries have to make sure that there is a specific dependence of the international community on these specific products, these niche products that this country is specifically making, because that increases trust in the international market. Understand that when you invest more into a specific discipline, there is a better chance of a discipline, which creates more quality products for a very long time. When that happens, the international community becomes dependent on those things because in their perception, that's the only thing that has existed for a very long time, and that trust that exists makes that country very relevant in the international community. Understand that other disciplines cannot necessarily create the same type of revenue because one of the niche capabilities of the country that I've shown, but then secondly there are niche demands that exist at a point in time where other disciplines are not needed. There is no demand for those disciplines. We don't know why there should be a supply, right? Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is on principle of reciprocity. When you get something from someone exclusively, you have to give it back. The government is benefiting from teaching this very discipline, and understand that resources are limited. So that means there is an obligation on the government to make decisions that increase their revenue. On the comparative, people that actually generate the money are disincentivized to pursue it, because at the end of the day, you're not investing into it. There is no reason for people there is less incentive for people to pursue the discipline that is creating money. So that means that more people are likely to fall out or move out of the countries, right? The last thing I'm going to talk about is that investments does not necessarily mean good output, right? Because therefore it's important to invest into the ones that are already giving more output, so that because one, people patronize it more, but two, people have more capability of that production. So in our world, you are creating more professional and more opportunities, and two, you are also fulfilling the state obligation to provide for what people actually need and not just giving anything.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First things that we need to understand for the context of debate to be as it is to understand that every single person is different. This is directly tied to their particular interests that people want to pursue. Why do people have different interests? Due to socialization. So you were brought up and you want to become a doctor because you saw your mother be a doctor. You want to become a lawyer because your uncles and aunties were lawyers. But me, I saw my brother be an artist. I saw my sisters pursue music. So that's where my interests are tied. Second thing is people's intrinsic abilities and capabilities. So every single person has a different thing that they can be able to do, and they can be able to tap into to be able to maximize the potential that they are able to get out of it. But second thing that we also have to notice then is that even if people have same interests, single person wants to become whatever field that they want to do because like bringing about enough economic returns. You should recognize that people don't choose where they are born. This is to say that even if you want to become a doctor, the circumstances that are around you, so things such as poverty, so you probably want to pursue that, but because like you don't have access to funds and all of those things, like you will not be able to do that. But last thing then is like, even if you are in a better place, you probably, because of the happenings around the world, such as inflation, economic, these things, you probably not be able to tap into this. But then why do we think that this is something that should not be like taken on by the governments here? See, it's very simple. Policies are things that governments implement for able to get returns out of it. The free SHS policy was not implemented because they wanted to get graduates out of this. It was implemented to get their future. So in the next 20 years, every single person that leaves high school will be able to go to SHS for free. This is to say that every single government in their decision to choose a particular policy should not just look on the now or what is happening currently, but should be able to look into the future and the extensive benefits that you are getting. Looking at the fact that economics or like the funding that you are getting out of this is not something that is like it's not something that's going to be stagnant, given the fact that like in the past people were interested in art, people were interested in like finding bones and like building those things, but currently people are interested in the tech world. So this is what you are saying is very simple. Because everybody's trooping into tech, government should invest in tech. What if in the next 20 years the government only focuses on tech and tech doesn't tech loses the focus, and it means that the government is losing? We don't think that economic standing should be the thing that policy should be like implemented on these things, and like people like governments necessarily should not like take these particular policies based on economic standards. Sometimes that it's not stagnant and it changes from period to period, years to years. So if they want to win on that clash, they have to prove to us that economic standing is something that is going to be stagnant, or like they know for sure that there's going to be any benefits. Recognize that the benefits they are going to get is probably going to be minimal in the now, because now you get thousands of dollars in that particular sector. But as a government, you have to look into the future and be able to like pass particular policies that are going to benefit them. But second thing is on education here, and why we think education should be accessible. So everybody should have access to things like knowledge. So things like your ability to know something, to speak in the debate room, your ability to be able to go to school and pursue a career, and all of these things. We think that given the fact that every single person has a different interest, so like there are so many sports that exist, but we are here because we want to do debate. Somebody is playing volleyball, somebody is playing basketball. All of these things are tied to like particular people's like interest. We think that it's illegitimate to prevent people from gaining access to basic things such as education, and like preventing them from being able to tap into their potential and pursue their interests. At the point where you are limiting their funding and pick, like if somebody is poor, they can't be able to access these things, it means that they have to be forced to take a particular thing. They have to like to take on these things. This is particularly important for marginalized groups and people that are like in like poverty areas. So for blacks and like maybe somebody that is marginalized in a particular community, so where there are so many stereotypes surrounding these people have to rely on this public funding. So it means that if your interest is not tied to what is giving them the money, it means that you don't get to pursue. They have to be stuck in the cycle. They have to stuck in the stereotypes. If you are poor, you continue to be poor. You can't break out of the generational suffering that you are suffering, and then like necessarily people don't get to be free and people don't get to emancipate. Yeah. But then, why do we think then that even if like anything, we should just allow people to choose? We think it's based on the principle of free will and autonomy. Every single person should have a decision and should have access to multiple options that exist. At the point where we are passing this particular policy, what it means then is that you are limiting the choices that people have. It means that if you don't have money, or you have to rely, because you have to rely on this public funding, you have to just particularly take like a particular action in one sector. You are limited. It means that your choices are not being like respected. Your ability to extend your free will, and I'll take you later, relax. Your ability to extend your free will and your autonomy is not being respected. What it means then is that you have to forego your talent, you have to forego your interest, you are forced into a cushion. What's the impact of this? You're going to probably end up with people that are going to pursue these careers, you're going to be unhappy, their productivity is directly tied to their ability to be able to give outputs. At the point where these people are not excited, these people don't have an incentive to give in their best, it means that their economic things that you even want, the money that you want, the funding that you want, is probably going to reduce because they don't have an incentive to give their best shoot.
See, the government cannot accommodate all of these sectors, but these people can be accommodated by the private sector.
Bro, see, it's very simple. They have to prove why the private sector has an interest to cater for all these single people. We think as a government, you have a burden. Like these things like social contract theory, they're supposed to provide to every single person because they contribute to you and they make sure that's like you give the relevance as a government then. But then what is the implication of this and what's going to happen in their world? See, it's very simple. It means that every single person that the government funds, the quality of these people, given the fact that they are being forced, it means that their quality is going to be reduced, their output is going to be reduced. The government is just going to waste resources to find thousands of people that are probably not going to give them the maximum utility that they are going to give. So the government should set particular policies that caters for a lot of people, and like people can be able to like contribute to these economic things that like they are going to do. But second thing is on like what they say in their world. They say that based on the principle of reciprocity, people will have an incentive to contribute. See, emotionally, because you've given me $10,000 to be able to contribute, like to study medicine or to study law, I feel burdened to contribute. But given the fact that you've given every single person that $10,000 to contribute, it means that thousands of people are pursuing that degree. The whole pool becomes saturated. Given the fact that you don't prove that the government is necessarily going to like create new like avenues of jobs or all of those things, it means that people are most likely going to be unemployed. So you end up being a graduate with a degree. You want to contribute to the government, but you can't because you have to stay there. You're probably going to end up pursuing something like sell indomie in front of your mother's house or something. But second thing they say is like, public demand. People are interested. See, interest change. In the past, nobody knew what tech was. In the past, nobody knew what phones were, the benefits of it. But now it is changing. It is evolving. The government should set blanket policies that caters for the evolution and how people change. At the point where you are limiting it, it means that when it changes, you are stuck. You don't have any contribution. You don't have anything to rely on. If you don't get anything here, you think that people should be allowed to choose what they want. People should have access to education. Don't limit people from pursuing their degree. Proud
Thank you, the opposition, for moving out the case of the opposition bench. The House now recognizes the Deputy Prime Minister to sum up the case of moving out the vote.
All right. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. From Team OG, our case in this debate is very simple. Equality of states only makes sense as long as survival and utility is assured. Aliyah tells you that equality within this debate is not yielding enough utility. This means that when you invest less into the discipline that creates the most revenue, what you do is that you actively reduce the chances of increasing revenue by all of the harms Aliyah even tells you. That means that the little utility that you are getting, even in these minority sectors, might be lost due to the loss of revenue, right? Government cannot take an action that hurts more people. The harms principle beats these guys, right? But first of all, let me take team I believe I can fly, right? These guys are out of this debate because they say that government should dream big and look into the future, because in the future things can always change. Two responses to that. Number one, this is economics, not pop culture, right? Future trends always follow a trajectory that is predictable. But secondly, even if you don't buy that, the fact that in the future AI can become a big thing doesn't show that the government, like that a government like Ghana or a government like China has the capability to cash out from AI, right? This is economics. Every country has an inclination based on who they are. In Africa, it's natural resources. Why should we diversify into entertainment when our inclination is on natural resources? We don't think that makes sense, right? Thirdly, on choice. Panel, understand that my partner has already told you that choice does not exist because equality, like within this debate, is impossible for governments to achieve because like resources are limited, right? But secondly, Aliyah has already shown you how such choices already tilt towards our side because people in a country are most inclined to participate in the most important or most relevant sectors. In Ghana, everybody wants to be a doctor, right? Like because like we know that doctors, lawyers, etc. are the ones who have the most money. If their case is that there are always a few people who are very deviant and who would want to be artists anyway, Aliyah tells you that there are private sectors who can, like there are private actors who can take care of that, right? We don't think that they have a case in these debates. Now, on the case of the opposition bench that CEO is going to run, because they asked the POI on that, right? Their case that this action is going to make markets and economies of countries more vulnerable to like failure or shocks in case the dominant discipline fails. Panel, listen. Number one, in order for any team on this bench to prove, in order for them to win on that clash,
they have to prove the huge probability that these market shocks will happen. We think that the likelihood of that happening is very, very low because of the following three things. Number one, market failures do not happen in the air, right? They occur due to pragmatic errors in planning and execution within the country, right? Secondly, these countries' economies depend on the dominant disciplines that we are talking about for survival. These governments, therefore, always prioritize their stability and constantly monitor these dominant sectors to make sure that they are well protected from failure, right? It looks like China with the tech industry making policies that make sure that that particular industry is never going to fail no matter what, because that's where they survive. But thirdly, the major disciplines of these countries enjoy the status of being major disciplines, not because countries just get up and choose, oh, let's prioritize AI or entertainment or industry or agriculture, but because of some specific significant capacity and capability that these countries have that makes these sectors the most reasonable to prioritize. It looks like a country like Ghana prioritizing cocoa, therefore we would invest in like agriculture, right? It looks like the DR Congo prioritizing cobalt and precious minerals, therefore we would want to prioritize mining engineering as a discipline. And so when these guys say that, oh, you can invest equally, we feel that doesn't even make sense, because I've said this so many times in this debate that this is economics, right? You cannot provide equality for all sectors, right? That means that it's inevitable. It's a concession in this debate that you cannot provide equality. Therefore, what you do, you have to prioritize certain things. And on which metrics should you prioritize those things? The things that give you the most utility is very, very easy to understand in this debate, right? To this end, we think that a world in which funding is allocated impacts that failure of these non-dominant sectors can have. We think that the risk of loss is far more important and far more painful than the probability of gain, right? So even if uncertainty exists in both worlds, the risk of loss that happens in these countries is enough reason for the government to not want to buy into it, right? But secondly, on the reversibility of harm that exists, because if you allocate money into these disciplines and their sectors fail, you can't get that money back. And although there's a chance that they may succeed because uncertainty exists, we don't think that risk is worth it, right? Understand that the allocation that we are talking about in this debate is huge amounts of money, huge allocations within the budget, right? We're talking about things like improving infrastructure, subsidizing fees, including improving research like funding, and so on and so forth. These guys can...
Ready, yes. Great. So, beginning in 3, 2, 1. Panel. The problem in status quo already is that in general, people agree in status quo that certain jobs have higher returns. The only difference is that currently the government provides equal or almost equal funding for all of them, right? What is the difference on their side? The tipping point is that in status quo, there are things like scholarships that even are more available to STEM opportunities and things like that, right? Why is this important? It means that if I'm done with school and I want to do my master's or pursue master's in engineering outside, it's much more easier for me to get it than for me to pursue a master's in sociology and things like that. That already exists in status quo. The tipping point is on their side. When you reduce the funding for these places, it's even more worse or more difficult for me to access that funding to pursue my master's in sociology, anything, because more people are now interested in the STEM jobs and things like that. That in of itself is bad. We think that even currently, we think status quo is even fine as long as the access is spread. But then what do these guys tell you, right? They come to run a very funny analysis on investments and how it will bring back less risk and things like that. Because the risk is less on their side. They say that governments have less finance on their side, so they want to push it into something that they think will bring them more money. They still give into the fact that there could be an instance where the job market crashes and then these people have to shift again. It is worse then when you've invested all your money into one sector than on our side, because at least the risk is even spread out and more people can have like something to fall back on. When you push your money into one place and it fails, where next do you go to? We are playing with like they are playing with people's finances and people's taxes and things that they played. We don't want that on our side, right? Then again, talk about how on their side there is reversibility of harm, right? We think that actually there is no reversibility of harm. On our side, they claim that if they like you can go back to the drawing board and create another policy and things like that. All those things, the harm will not even exist in the first place if you spread that finances into different sectors that could actually bring you some form of investment if one fails, right? And this is like basic economics, you know. If there are more people going to like fields like engineering and doctors and things like that, it means the demand, like the availability of doctors become a lot. It means that the value that these people attach to these things reduce. Now, because there are less doctors, I think this is in the system, people pay more for these people, so they benefit from their hard work. When there is plenty doctors, plenty engineers, and you don't want to pay somebody because you think that they are demanding too much, you move on and get somebody else because there are plenty people in the system. Basic economics, when more people rush into one place, the value decreases. They can't come and tell us that these places have economics. They don't even understand economics themselves, right? But then again, they talk about how they think that things like private tourists, like private sectors and people who want to enter things like public arts and things like that. We realize that in status quo, all the people that can actually access those things are people that are privileged in society, that their parents can support them or cushion them if these things go bad. It means that if I'm from a non-privileged home or I'm poor and I want to enter into public like arts and things like that, I would be less incentivized to do so, because if it fails, my parents cannot cushion me or I don't have any other thing to fall back on because the funding will not even be accessible for me, right? But then again, right, why is investing into one place bad? Because they say, and they give a funny example that Okumewood is bad, nobody wants to watch it. Why is it bad? Because already in status quo there is less funding for them, so it means that they are not able to bring back higher returns and things like that. That's why people want Hollywood and things like that, because their government funds them. When you even reduce the funding, then you even incentivize them to not even do well. You don't make them want to even do better. So these things continue to go down, and like there's no like world in which they can even become better, right? We don't think that applies on their side. But then what does Ekadonko tell you? She brings you like 5 different solid arguments that we think you should think of, and like when you go to the deliberation, really weigh them. They'll first tell you how policies work, right? When you're making a policy, you have to put in mind that 1, you have the hope that it's going to be beneficial for a long period of time. 2, a lot of resources go into it, right? You have to consult a lot of experts. Some of these experts are from fields that are from places that are less funded. It means that even when you, and like that is also another thing that goes wrong in their side, because when you pull funding, you lose the amount of people that go into these places. So you're even making public policies. The access to experts from sociology places, from philosophy and all these things are less because you pull funding and people are not incentivized to go there. So even affects public policy, right? But then again, she tells you that you also need to spend years working on these policies. At this point, what it means that when you are creating a policy based on something like the economic metric, that a job is in demand for like the next few years, right? It is bad because job demands and things like that come and go. 10 years ago, when you told your mother that you want to be an influencer, she will tell you to focus on your books and not like going to these places. Now it is a very lucrative business. In the next 10 years, phones will probably be replaced by like working robots and things like that. And people will be more like into jobs that like work these robots and things like that. It means that you have to change your your policy to be able to accept all those things and accept those things. We think that it is bad then because all these resources you put inside cannot bring you back that investment that you've made into it, right? Investments don't work on a I wish it happens like this basis. Investments work on a solid basis. This is not a solid basis. Closing. Opening.
So I already showed you in my speech how investment does not mean revenue. In my speech, I showed you 2 reasons why there is more revenue, because the public demand and capability of the country. The whole case is contingent on the fact that investment equals revenue.
So you say investment doesn't equal money, but your problem is that the government has little finances, and how you want to increase the finances. How do you increase finances if you don't make proper investment that can give you the increased finances? Like, bro. But then what again do these, like that's about marginalized groups, right? She says that, and that is the thing, right? In state school already they don't even get access into any like places, right? What helped them was quotas. Even now that we've heard that they've removed quotas and it's even harder for them to get into these places, it means that when you reduce public funding for these things, more people are oversaturated in the side that they claim is more like that brings back more investment. It means that the pool for them to compete with these people is very difficult. It means that marginalized groups suffer because now you make it difficult for them to get access into these places. We do not think people should be restricted from education because of where they come from. We think education should be equitable and accessible. She then tells you about how free will and autonomy is something that's very, very important, right? These guys will say, oh, but people can still go because they still have their autonomy. But at a point where your autonomy and free will is held back by something, it means you don't really have that free will. What's that something today's debate? The lack of funding or the little, like the reduced funding. It means that when you give these guys, like the places that bring higher returns, more funding, these people don't have an incentive to go there because they know that they are the ones who are supposed to grow up and like make money to make mama proud and come and make money for my family members. So they'll be forced to go into places that are seen to be very lucrative. It means that some people, what first happens is done on a psychological level, right? People are doing things that they don't want to do, but they are there because they have to feed their families. Things can lead to like depression and things like that because these are not courses that are easy. You have to spend years learning. If you don't even like the job, like the course, you suffer a lot. But then again, it means that when there's public demand, private sectors is what brings the economy certain benefits, right? You remove funding from things like art, dancing, and things like that. The tourism sector loses out on that metric. We do not think that is a good policy that the government should enact. We think that it should care for all its citizens, not just those that are similarly in higher like education jobs. Oh, wins today's debate. Proud.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, and that brings us to the end of the opening up of today's debate. To comment the closing up of today's debate, let's recognize a member of Tvucc.
Can I have a drink of water first? I'm a bit parched. Water. I'm really sorry. That's I just... I'm really sorry. I begin in 3, 2, 1. Joel Abuaji is a medical student. I am a philosophy student. The main difference that exists between the jobs or the fields that we occupy is that his field has more necessity to the state. Why is this true? Firstly, because of the fact that without these things, without these specific jobs, the state wouldn't be able to function. This is something you need to note specifically from CG's case. Because note that the main reason why they are high economic fields, the main reason why people pay doctors more is simply because of the fact that the services they provide are things that are not necessarily easy to get and things that you don't get everywhere, and the fact that you need to put more resources into learning these things. That is why they are essentially what they are. We're going to show to you therefore why giving everybody equitable access means that
you disproportionately harm those places and disproportionately how much the state is able to actively help the people that they exist in, and why that is something that is important. You need to note that the reason why OO is fought into these debates is very simple. Firstly, social shifts exist, social perceptions exist. People would always gravitate towards certain jobs. People will always want to do certain jobs more. Why is this true? People want to be a doctor simply not because of the fact that it brings economic status, but because doctors are glamorous. People like the law. You see on Twitter today that Esquire, because people want that glamour, people want that status. That means then that at the point where we have more people gravitating into those places, it is better for us to have that we fund these places more, and able to have capacity to fund more people and get people to do these things. But note therefore, like what is the tipping point? And that's what we bring to you into this debate. Firstly, the state is suffering to fund these people. We live in a world of an economic crisis where funding these institutions are harder. But secondly, you have no assurance that the people you are funding are likely to stay in the state that you exist in. That means that at the point where you are putting more money into these people, in what way are you going to get some level of benefit to have your state, and at what case do you have that you are going to have a safe, sure bet that people are likely to stay? If you provide a mechanism that allows these bigger places to have more funding, they are likely to stay, they're likely to be more pushing, and likely to help your economy more. But at the point where you do it on that other regard, you are likely finding people who don't give as much economic incentives to the state. That means that you are, as they say, you are spreading your money elsewhere and you're not getting as much benefit. But something you need to note that is very, very important is that these states or these people, like the money doctors get is disproportionately higher than the things that they talk about. It's like how people are able to get like $1 billion and people are able to get like 1,000 CDs concurrently. You will never be able to get $1 million. That is why it is so important to fund these people, because they give some level of certainty. First, on a case of necessity, at any point in history, any field that brings economic returns will be resource intensive. If politics, and that is something we need to note, if at any point in time we need to fund politics because it has become a better resource, we'll fund it. That is the model, that is what is going to likely to happen in our world. Because at any point in time, if we realize that a certain, so everything they talk about is out of today's debate. Because at the point where art is more important and art brings more economic returns, we'll simply fund art, and that is what is going to happen. That means that anything they talk about is not likely to happen in our world, right? Note then that not all fields have the same need, because certain fields need them more. The smaller the field, the less likely they would have a greater, relatively greater need to sustain them. Structural reasons why. Firstly, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be a businessman, you have to engage with a greater volume of knowledge. You have to engage with a specific volume of knowledge. You also need to have to engage with things like time. You have more time. That's why doctors spend more time in the society, in their colleges. That is because it is simply harder to do these things, and it's not something that's likely to do. But note that the capacity that these fields have to be able to, these departments have to be able to fund these things is very simple. They need like things like field trips. People who are in the philosophy department don't need to go on so many field trips. They don't need to cut up more bodies. That means that they don't need to have as much capacity. That means then that proportionally these fields that do higher or have more economic return need these things, and they're not going to get what they need to be able to survive. Why is this something that is important? If we don't fund these smaller departments more, what is likely to happen? Firstly, these smaller departments will likely survive anyway, because they don't have such stringent burdens on how they operate. Firstly, like teaching philosophy doesn't require you to have so many stringent funds, so many stringent mechanisms. But secondly, in the case of AI and the internet, these resources are easily more accessible to these humanities, such that you don't really need for them to actually have this level of change, right? But nextly, like my philosophy department has private investors, because these people like philosophy and people like actually have these fields still exist. That means that anywhere they'll still exist, and private investors are not likely to fund them because they believe that they have some level of certainty. But at the point when you tip the scale and you give these people some money that they don't need, but then you take the money that these people need, you are actively going to detract from them. Why is this something that is bad? Firstly, because it means that this notes that we need these people to actually exist for us to make more money as a state. At the point where you remove them, you lose the capacity that they have to be able to get more people, to get more doctors, to get more lawyers. What does this mean? It means jobs are likely to reduce. But even if they are not likely to reduce, the quality of the jobs is likely to be lost, because now you can't actually fund the field trips. You can't actually find people to cut up more different like cadavers in your or cut up corpse in your doctors. That means that the practice that leads up to them having that quality faculty of judge is likely to be lost. That means that in our world, we have bad doctors, bad etc., bad lawyers, or lawyers who actively haven't been able to have a sustaining field that allows them to do these things, right? That means that at the point where the state needs these skills, it is proportionally better for us to put more funds into those places because they give us more return and they allow us to have a stable economy. The reason why this is important than everything is because to show you a necessity for that in that regard. But something that you need to know is that this is legitimate. Firstly, because of the fact that at the point where anything threatens the capacity of the state, it is necessary for us to put more money into the things that don't threaten the capacity of the state. At the point where you have to have more money to do more things, you need to have a way to bolster the groups of people who actively bring you more funds and actually get you to some level of benefit. But lastly, on social mobility and how this is better in our world, we think that at the point where you put more poor people are likely to want to go to these jobs more because poor people are likely to want to become a doctor because it will take them out of their slums. It is going to get more money. At the point where you disproportionately cut these things, you limit the capacity that allows these people to be able to enter these spaces in the first place. But even if you don't, you create a mechanism where they never actually get the worth of their money. So even if you are going to a school as a doctor, you are putting more money into being a doctor, but you never actually get what you are supposed to get, and you are poor, so you are likely having to go to drop out. We get a better mechanism that allows them to exist and allows them to take them out of their poverty in our world. In their world, well, they'll probably try to become a doctor, but they'll have to pay more fees because the money that the government is giving to these public institutions or these public medical schools is something that is non-existent. But lastly, there's competition between public schools and private schools on who to provide the best person in the labor market. That means then, how does the government allow the people who go to these government schools to have more ways to be able to enter the market? We believe that it's better in our world. Oh, it's forced.
Thank you, member of government, for staying the duties of the government bench. We now recognize the member of opposition to equally proceed for the opposition bench. Ready when you are.
Okay. Starting my speech, I'll take you from opening. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to do a couple of things in this speech. The first is to explain the impact specifically on marginalized communities and why this is principally illegitimate. Second thing is to give a principled justification and thirdly, give you the exclusive economic impact we get on our side of the house when you diversify funding across all disciplines within the state. So the first thing, and the reason why Archimedes' POI was important to opening government was that which disciplines are oftentimes going to get access to this funding. And from their setup, you get the idea that it's going to be STEM, right? Because they claim there's rapid tech innovation, demand for skilled workers, this tech industry contributes to significant GDP growth, there's competition in the global economy, and so state has to be necessarily self-reliant and things like that. The reason why that facet is something that is problematic is that oftentimes when you prioritize funding into these specific sectors, what you create is you create an artificial imposition of choice where you need to divert individuals' attention into these specific programs they want to fund. But the problem is that it is one that is not equitable to everyone to a large extent. Why? Because first off, it is expensive to access these specific programs. But then two, there are complicated application processes, which means that oftentimes minorities get disenfranchised in the application process. But then thirdly, in this particular program that are going to be prioritized, there's long duration of study. And then fourthly, it means that employability becomes something that is difficult because oftentimes people within our class are individuals who want to maximize economic dependency in the short interim. What you do on their side of the house is that necessarily increase the inequality gap that exists between individuals within the state. We think it's something that is very problematic. Why is this something that is illegitimate? We think that giving the people who are going to be able to access these specific programs are going to be people who are in the positions of wealth and privileges. It means to a large extent they are the individuals who get political opinions represented in the state, because they are the only individuals who have exclusive access to this specific benefit. Because to a large extent, we prove to you that minority groups and individuals from marginalized communities don't get access to this. We think it is illegitimate to use education, which is a social engineering tool, to dismantle structural disenfranchisement in the status quo to perpetuate inequality. We think it's something that education itself is trying to solve. At a point where you use that same tool to perpetuate that significant degree of inequality, we think it's something that is bad. But then second justification, we think historically, higher education was primarily viewed as a means of training individuals for economic participation. But notice that societal priorities are things that are changing because of things like increased polarization, inequality, and complex global challenges. What it implies is that there's a societal recognition that economic development alone on their side of the house cannot ensure societal well-being. We think this is important because equal distribution across all disciplines influences fields like political science, sociology, etc., which are all important to address the diverse needs of current education, or diverse needs of the current global order, which is important because we think where the world has gravitated towards now is not only about economic opportunities and things like that. There are other things that require funding to every discipline within the status quo to ensure that there are significant benefits that arise as a result of that. So even if you buy their best things to get economic benefit and things like that, there are structural issues that their walls don't cater for. We think you don't get better societal outcome and overall good when you prioritize their side of the house. But fourthly, in terms of the exclusive impact that arises from our side of the house, we think that first off, the global economy is one that is evolving. It means that on our side of the house, we are able to develop an adaptable workforce that meets this demand of the global economy. The problem with their side of the house is that insofar as you cannot guarantee a certainty that everything is going to be good, investment is going to be like a significant investment is going to give you an assured guarantee, you need to hedge against the risk that exists. So on our side, we diversify resources such that we're able to create an adaptable workforce within that instance. But then second thing, a well-rounded funding means that insofar as we're able to diversify the risk, we're able to absorb economic shocks in terms of unpredictabilities that exist. But then thirdly, when we democratize education across disciplines on our side of the house, we think at least individuals are able to achieve a job which strengthens the middle class and supports consumer spending. On their side of the house, given the structural limitations, it becomes difficult to guarantee jobs for individuals across the individuals within the state because of the structural inherencies we prove. Why do we think consumer spending is a prerequisite for economic growth within the state? We think that one, it gives businesses increased revenue. But then secondly, as consumer demand itself rises, businesses require more workers to meet that particular demand. It means that businesses are able to create expansions, or businesses are able to expand so that it even creates a ripple economic benefit by employing individuals within that particular instance. But then fourthly, we think we are able to create confidence in the economy. We are able to signal investors. We think investment and things like that are also dependent on things like consumer spending that exists to an extent where it creates an economy that is even good, and consumers are not able to spend. You still don't signal to investors that your economy is one that is stimulated by economic growth and this kind of spending that exists. It means that even if at their best you don't get massive level of investment within that particular instance, we think it's something that is bad. OG.
He never said they would prioritize STEM. If arts bring more revenue, we will invest in it. But for my characterization, I've shown you how poor people want to pursue lucrative disciplines.
Great. So that's why we beat them, right? They say if art brings more revenue, we are going to invest in art. If science brings more revenue, we are going to invest in science. The problem is that when you invest into one specific place, there are still individuals you lock out. If you invest in art, you lock people out in science. When you invest in science, you lock people out in art. What it means is that on our side of the house, we create that diversity. So there's always a guarantee of consumer spending on our side of the house. On their side, you can't guarantee that. Consumer spending is a prerequisite for every economic growth to exist on that side of the house. On our side of the house, we get better outcomes for states, for individuals. They can't guarantee equity for every individual within that state. We think a state premise on that is one that is inherently flawed. We think on our side of the house, we maximize the outcomes for individuals. For them to win the debate, they need to prove why they're able to guarantee well-being for individuals in their state. Insofar as they are going to prioritize one discipline, they need to account for how they are going to cater for the people who they deprioritize in other disciplines, we are incredibly proud.
Thank you, member of opposition, for extending the cases of the opposition bench to wrap up the cases of the government bench. We recognize the government bench.
In 7 minutes.
Ready when you are. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this is why the whole of up bench is funny. Because from opening opposition to closing opposition, this is what they tell you. That you know what, these things are expensive and they take a long duration to enter. So you know what, minorities cannot access it. That is exactly the point. Because it's expensive and minorities cannot access it, that is why government has to subsidize using public funding for people to access it. That is why their case is ridiculous. Because at any point in time, they then have to prove why in their world the minorities that want to do medicine can now do it, especially when they say it is expensive. They cannot do it because it is still expensive. At least in our world, people can do it. The reason why locking people out cannot be bargained on any side of the house is that also on their side of the house, they lock people out. That is because the minorities that also want to do medicine cannot also do it because it is expensive. They cannot do it. Government does not subsidize enough for them to be able to do it. Equal means that at any point in time, those fields will also be funded less. What that necessarily means is that people that place will equally be more expensive because then they cannot do it. That's exactly the reason why we do this from our side. Because it's expensive, when government subsidizes and government funds it more, it means that we take a majority of the cost off of the people that are paying it. What that means that in most instances, people that can access these things are more. They are very ridiculous. But panel, moving on to why they are even third and fourth even more. One, the reason why they are actually third and fourth is that another argument that runs in the whole of opposition. Global economies are evolving. That means that because global economies are evolving, we have to have diversification. First off, they don't understand diversification because diversification doesn't mean equal allocation into every particular aspect. You can allocate more to one aspect and less to one aspect. It is still diversification because you don't cut off humanities. What that necessarily means is that diversification still exists on our side. But no, even more importantly, the reason why we are still winning is that when social shift happens, government policies are also shifting. What that means is that government policies are not static. What that means is that at any point in time where social shifts happen, governments also have to shift with the social shifts. What that necessarily means that on their side, if social shifts happen, we agree we would also shift. But note, the reason why the economies are evolving is being better for our side is because economies are evolving. Now we are shifting towards things like STEM. We have to prepare our people to fit into the job market. Note, the reason why we are doing this is not because we are now going to train people and then create jobs. Jobs already exist for these things. The job markets are demanded for these things. What that means is that we need to create people to fit that demand. What that necessarily means is that in our world we are much better. But then moving on to more things, they say investment. The reason why we get investment on our side is because there is growing investment in STEM and the ability for people to want to invest in STEM. What that means is that because we are going with the social shift that is happening in status quo, that means that we'll get more investment in our world. On their side, they don't get investment. Moving on to why we further win today's debate. We are the only side that proves to you a tipping point. What these people tell you is that more people are going into it, so let's fund it more. We don't say that. We say that these fields actually need this money, so let's fund it more. What that necessarily means that on our side, we actively win because we show a better field for necessity. But the panel, even more importantly on why we win, we show you that at the end of the day, on these supposed cases on social mobility and minorities and why minorities are important, the reason why that is funny is that minorities are the ones who depend on public universities because the people that can afford private universities will go there anyway. The reason why that is important for this debate is that because they are the ones who depend on public universities, they need to be able to get the best outcome that exists. For them to be able to get the social mobility that they need, they need to be able to study things that will make them good for the job market. The reason why your side is bad is because of the competition that my partner tells you about. Because public universities are competing with private universities minorities for jobs, etc., and the ability to get jobs and all of those things. What you do is that you make these minorities less likely to get these jobs, even in the events where they are able to afford to study things like medicine. What that means is that because they have small resources, they put it somewhere, but then they don't get enough jobs because we don't have enough infrastructure to train them to compete with the private school kids. What that means that in most instances, their social mobility is hurt. We are not able to provide products of the schools who can be able to compete with these private school kids. On our side, we close that gap, even if it's a little bit, we close it, because that means that on our side, we give them a better chance of social mobility. On their side, those minorities are fucked up because they cannot be able to do these things. Moving on, yes, opening.
Okay, see, so one, the government does not give a lot of students money for projects if they don't need it. But then secondly, the problem that doctors want is money for beds and x-rays, not educational money. They can't find out if they
Panel, please, where do they teach them x-rays? Isn't it in school? Like, I don't understand why this is happening. Like, where do they teach them? They teach them those things in school. Ask Joel Abwaji, they teach him how to inject people and all of those things in school. That is where they need the funding. I don't understand. Panel OO and why that POI makes them even fourth. One, they say that, people do not have intrinsic abilities and capabilities to be able to do these things. We think that as long as we don't remove funding totally from these places, the people that want to still go into it will go into it nonetheless. But then at the end of the day, we think that the reason why this is even more important is because people are born into different circumstances, like they say, because people are poor and people don't have money. We need to be able to create a world where we don't create a barrier of accessibility for places like STEM, where people cannot idea of the things about mental health of people, that people's mental health will be hurt because they'll be forced to study what they don't want to study. Panel, when social trends change, like a majority of society moves towards that social trend, what that means is that in most instances, the people that want to study those things, or the minority, will get it anyway. We think that in our world, the majority are more important, but the reason why minorities even benefit more in our world is that even at a point where their states are fucking them up and the economies are bad, just as my partner tells you, they can be able to opt out into other economies. And my partner tells you that what is the proof that they will stay in these countries when economies are bad and states are fucking them up and the economies are bad in their states? The ability to get remote jobs, the ability for them to opt out of their economies and go into other economic fields that will accept the opportunity to opt out of economies that are extremely bad for them and they cannot exist in. In our world, social mobility is much better and we win, proud to break to the semi-final.
Thank you, government, for serving up the case of the government bench. We now recognize the position we choose for the students.
Hi. So, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. I've never been proud to be a medical student by meeting these people. What did Kelvin tell you in this debate? There are a couple of things. Consumer spending. He says that market niche for these areas would always exist on our side, even on their side. And so a state that claims has no funding is like directly going to ignore those areas that is also able to give them some degree of funding. Like it's common economics. If I don't have money, I need to be able to diversify my resources such that even the smallest areas I can get something. The only response they say from their side is that states are still going to give them funding on their side. The word of emotion itself kills them, because when you prioritize an aspect, you deprioritize another aspect. These people are out. The second thing they say, Kelvin tells you, is that it is very difficult for you to quantify some disciplines because the metric by which you are quantifying the economic output is not objective. So a course like psychology, human resources do not translate to short-term economic benefits. And that's the reason why it's very, very difficult for you to know to what extent psychology is going to give you more money than medicine. It means that because it's a belief motion, an objective observer needs to be able to be objective, to be able to access the metric at which you are going to diversify funding. On that particular premise, we already beat them. But the next thing is on the impact on minorities, and these people are very ridiculous. I'm going to engage them on that. Look on your sheets. The only thing OO says is that minority groups are going to suffer. Listen to our side. We explain which sides are likely to get funded, and then they co-opt into it, which is to say science, technology, innovation, mathematics, because those people are able to maximize outcome. The reason why we think that thing is bad is because minorities do not have access to these places, because A, they are very, very competitive, but B, they are very, very expensive, but C, it means that as a minority, when you finish these programs, it's very unlikely for you to have access to the job market. I would want to be able to vocationalize myself because I can still sew in front of my mother's shop. And so at the end of the day, I'm incentivized to enter into those fields on our side as opposed to their side. The next thing they say, notice that at that particular point, he explains to the government then becomes culpable for the minority inequality creation that exists. Because on their side, because the demand for that specific market will always exist, you entrench minorities and you keep them out of those specific places. This is a direct recognition that comes from Kelvin. But this is where we beat them all. We explain that even if government has a tipping point on their side, these economic generating university courses will still to some extent have magnificent support. And that is to say there's no exclusive benefits on their side. Because listen to them. They say that you are going to invest in areas that gives you more money. And they say private investors would want to invest. It means that even without state funding, because of their setup, which claims that you are going to get more funding on their side, private investors have more incentive to invest in their side. And so it already tips the scale, which means that these people have no tipping point in this debate. This particular team is even out. But why is my POI relevant? We explain to you why funding STEM skills in the job market leading to businesses and industries to invest in workforce. And that's the reason why Harvard University will still open, let me say, after school day for the final year students, and then private corporations will come in there to try and recruit them because there's that demand. But the second thing is that schools and education institutions often collaborate with private sector institutions to enhance these sectors. So GMPC scholarship, MasterCard Foundation scholarship still exists for these people, and you're still going to add an additional state funding to disproportionize their skill. These people are already out, which means that in terms of limited resources, we beat opening government because we are able to co-opt their impact of taxes anyways on our side because there's still funding for these groups of people on our side. But why we beat OO is quite simple. The whole of their case strives on my prioritization of individual interest and autonomy. There are two things to this. Well, I think states limit autonomy for the maximization of public goods. If OG and CG manage to convince you that they maximize output, then it means that that particular argument is shaky. But the second thing is that the state's existence is the most important stakeholder because individuals exist within the state. Without sustaining the individual's interest is non-existent. We explain to you to what extent these particular non-quantifiable economic benefits are able to create a long-term stability. At that particular point in time, the award is a prerequisite for the award to happen. If you do not get this, I don't know what you're going to get again. Direct engagements to opening government. They say public demand and interest of citizens. There are a couple of things. We are able to make demands anyway because I explained to you to what extent we get those particular investments. But the second thing, on their side, at best, they meet short-term demands. We say that short-term sustainable economic is dependent on the programs on our side, which is the long-term demands. By courses like humanities, which often have low returns, foster critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and application of direct perspectives, which is crucial for an informed citizen and social cohesion. A war-on the populace is better equipped to engage democratic processes and navigate societal challenges while challenging state policies. It means these non-quantifiable things as courses is the only way by which they are able to maximize individual output. But the second is that these disciplines ensure that organizations operate effectively by focus on talent management, employee well-being, organizational structure. This produces a stable workforce. It is only our courses that produces the stable workforces for them to work, for them to get that particular taxation. These people are out. It means that without a stable mental health, which are going to get from psychology, doctors cannot maximize output on their side. Meaning our impact is a prerequisite for their impact. The last thing is that the demand is because the state is not investing in these areas. So listen to me. I chose to read medicine because I know if I go and read something like psychology, when I finish, I will not get a job. The only way you are able to make me interested in going to read psychology is if you run an avenue for me. It means that on their side, the reason why people choose that particular program is not because they want, it's because they are forced by certain externalities. It means that there is no true choice on their side, and that's the reason they cannot maximize choice as an impact to win this debate. Now, let's deal with closing government. They are very ridiculous. Okay.
Now, what cannot be the reason why these guys are assuming that investment is
it's okay. If investment is not equal to utility, and you are saying you are going to invest in these programs, how do you get your utility? Like, these people are already out. I don't know why they are arguing. Let's deal with closing government. They say necessity. A couple of things. Well, yes, if doctors are really needed, like I say, without psychology, doctors are useless. And so I can only take care of you if I am stable, which is the courses that exist on our side. But the second thing is, he uses medicine for his metrics. Unfortunately for him, that is my field. Note that medicine does not generate as much because the state pays for almost all of its services through NHIS. His premise is already wrong. The next thing, he says private investors will still invest on their side. If OG says you are going to invest in an area that gives you more money, why would private investors leave their side and go and invest in our side? It means that already private investors are going to exist on their side.